Okay, so just to really start from scratch, 'cause I already have a sample in here. I'm going to get rid of the granulator and I'm going to go into my browser, into the packs area. This is the live pack that I downloaded with the Max for Live granulator. Now, I'm looking at this here because there's 3 different devices in here that'll end up in different locations in your browser based on the type of device they are. Right now, I want to focus on the Granulator II. This is the MIDI instrument. This is where all the wonderful stuff happens. So I'm going to take this, click and hold, and drag and drop it onto my first MIDI track. And there it is, and it's empty. Now, since it's a MIDI instrument, this would show up under your Max for Live MIDI instrument. Okay, Max instrument, I should say. And if I look, I can see there's Granulator 2. There's another device called Granulator Follow 2, which we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about or looking at. But this is also a MIDI instrument. There's another device that we're going to look at the end of all of this, if I go back to the packs, and that is the GranulatorInput device. This is actually an audio effect. It's not a MIDI instrument. So if you're looking for this and aren't looking in the packs, you would find that under Max for Live and audio effect. All right, GranulatorInput. Okay, with all that established now, here is my instrument. Now I want to throw a sample in here, and once I do and I play it, we're going to notice that it's not going to play back the same way it normally does. For example, here is, which one do I want to use? Let's try this one. All right. So this is a sample of some bells. I just got this from Ableton Live's library. All right. And in this case, it's just the one pitch, but we can hear that it starts loud and decays. If I take this sample and drop it into the granulator, and I can take a sample from anywhere and just drag and drop into this window. All right. So here is the bell sample. If I play a note, what happens? All right, it's not playing all the way through the sample. What it's doing, it seems like it's just looping a small part of it. Now, if we look at the display here, all right, there's like a little orange area, and this is the part that's playing, and this is referred to as my grain. When we're using a granular synthesis device, such as the granulator, the main thing that makes this unique is the fact that we're utilizing a grain as our sound source. A grain you can think of as a small chunk of audio, and I prefer to think of it as a very small loop. Ultimately, we're going to take this grain, this very small loop, and we can do things with it to make this sample play back in different ways. Right now, the size of my grain is here. This is given to us in hertz, all right? So we can make this bigger or smaller by just changing the grain size. And one really nice thing about this is that even though I refer to the grain as more of a loop, it's a bit more sophisticated than that because these grains will overlap. So it's not just like a singular loop that's just repeating once it gets to the end. You'll notice that as I hold this down, you'll see a playhead moving through the grain area, and often you'll see another playhead starting while the other one ends. And also here, you can tell, even though I've highlighted a bigger grain, we're starting the playback a little bit further in this note. So we're kind of avoiding the attack and mainly just focusing on the tone or the timbre. So this would be a great way to take a certain sound and basically kind of remove it from its original context and just focus on the tone, okay? Now there's quite a bit more I can do with the grain as well. Let me make the grain a bit smaller here. Now we'll see under the grain knob, we have the ability to make this respond to key tracking. So depending on how high or low the notes are that we play, that'll affect the grain size parameter. We have a spread parameter here, which is also really nice, where we can take the grains and slightly detune them on the left and right side. By detuning them on the left and right side, the grains on the left and right also will be a slightly different speed. So if I increase the spread parameter, just notice the difference between now and now. So even just playing around with this, there's quite a lot that we can do, but there's obviously a lot more that we can do once we look at all these different controls here. Now, again, we're talking primarily about the grain. All right. The grain is ultimately a small chunk of audio. This chunk of audio is looping and the grains are overlapping. Do we have more control over this grain or over this loop? Actually, we do. We'll look at how we can affect and manipulate the grain shape next.